Hi guys, and welcome back to TSW2. I do apologise for that awkward intro, but in all honesty I'm still not very good with that sort of thing. And as you can probably tell from the thumbnail, and indeed by where we are today, we are on the Island Line 2022 add-on. This is of course Rivet Games' recent, and in my opinion, welcome update to the original Isle of Wight route. It depicts the line how it is now, following the modernisation in 2021, and of course it includes the Class 484, one of which you can see over there on the platform. Now just taking a quick look around the station to see what's what before going and getting in that train, and obviously taking it for a drive. And as you can tell, in this instance I'm not particularly worried about punctuality, which is more than can be said for other times I've played this game. And what else is there to see here at Pier Head? Well, the first thing I've noticed is that, well, aside from this collectible, or this poster thingy, is that it seems like you can walk around a lot more of the station than you previously could. Do I want to give up? No, I don't want to give up control of that train. Probably should get to it before. That's the other thing, automatic doors. Never seen those before in this game. Now, one of the things I noticed when I was watching the preview stream was this. Sorry, a yacht hat. One of the things I noticed when I was watching a preview stream for this route is that Rivet Games have actually modelled in these barriers, or fences of sorts, to stop people from going on to platform 2, according to that number posted there. And this is realistic, because even though there are 2 tracks along Ryde Pier in real life, one of them has been out of action for quite a few years now. And of course that wasn't reinstated for this service, because there just wasn't any need to. Now, one thing that you'll notice as we go along is that some of the platform surfaces have been raised to allow for level boarding with the Class 484s. Now, the first thing you might notice about this train is that this is a basic recreation of the livery they have in real life, and this is a reskin that I made myself. Now, the reason why I did this is because I don't like the default livery that Rivet Games provided, which we might see later on. And the reason why they had to do a fictional version of the livery is because they apparently couldn't get the license couldn't sort out a licensing deal with South Western Railway. Ah, pressed the wrong button. Yeah, I'm used to just clicking on the door to get it open, but obviously in this train it's a different story. Right, what do we need to do? I did try the tutorial, but for this train, but I'm sorry, the voice over in that was just mind-numbingly boring, and it felt like an absolute chore to sit through it. But I do vaguely remember how to set this thing up. Wait, did I activate AWS properly? Yeah, I don't really understand why a train would need, a train on this line would need AWS. But, yeah, I can't really work out why the safety systems are not working, even though I just flipped the little switch over there. I mean, if it says cut in, then you should be getting a little AWS sunflower thing on the HUD. It's strange. I don't know what any of these other switches are for. I suppose we get the doors open. You can of course press these buttons, but I quite frankly can't be stuffed doing that, so I'm just using the Y and U keys. It's this guard buzzer. Okay. Actually, I just thought there's probably not much point in driving with AWS enabled. Okay, granted that is less realistic, but doesn't necessarily matter too much when we'll probably only see one other train on this journey, or pass one other train rather. I wonder if the doors close that slowly in real life. Now, one thing I noticed when I was doing the tutorial was the motor noise. Listen. So they got that initial whine correct, well, sort of, the one that you hear on these Class 230 and 484 units. Obviously rebuilt D78 stock, but there's all that extra background noise that you're hearing when the train moves off, and I don't know what that's doing there, because I think I'm certainly no expert on the 484s, but I didn't think that that initial motor whine could be drowned out by the noise of whatever other sort of a fan noise. At least it sounds like a fan to me. Anyway, as we go along here, you'll see that the water textures have been substantially, well, not substantially updated, but they have certainly been improved. So I remember previously the water texture on the original Isle of Wight route was awful, and more recently Rivet Games did update it to use the water texture of the West Cornwall local. Boy, have I got a bone to pick with that route. But for the purposes of this video, I won't really go into a rant over that route, but WCL, trying to stop in exactly the right place, which isn't necessarily necessary, but it's just something I prefer to do. Right, I need to go to the settings, because I just want to get rid of that weird multicoloured, the stop marker that you get on the platform. I don't know why that sometimes reappears usually when I think it's a new add-on, but either way, I find it annoying, because when you see those colours on the track, it just completely, well, to me it just completely ruins the immersion. Now I don't know about sorry about that, I had a bit of some sort of tickle in the throat. Anyway, I've only just noticed that this canopy here is actually now looks very low, and makes it all look very cramped, no doubt because of the raised platform surface. And you can really see just how much of a difference there was in the floor heights between the older Class 483s and the 484s. Now I did sit down, there's a cat. Incidentally, that kind of reminds me of that, what was it, Britannic Patroness of the Mediterranean, or Patroness, however you say it. But yeah, it's like that. That is almost like a virtual museum in some ways. It's not really a game necessarily, since you can't drive, or since you can't really take control of the Britannic and drive her. Well, not really drive her around, but you get the idea. You can do tours of the ship and go through a reenactment of the sinking. But yes, I realise that's got nothing to do with the video at hand. It's just that sometimes I can get fairly easily distracted. But hello. Yeah, Dovetail could certainly learn a thing or two from this smooth curve on the platform texture. Because if you've seen any of the stations on their Bakerloo line, you'll know that the platform edges are not smooth. They're just little straight sections set at different angles, and at some stations you'll get the 72 stop actually clipping into the platform surface. Right, that was Ryde Esplanade. Next station is Ryde St John's Road. Yeah, still a bit iffy on the sounds. Even though I did see an article on the Dovetail Live website that Rivet Games did apparently record sounds from a real Class 484. But it's one thing to record the sounds from the real thing, but whether or not it still sounds like the real thing in game is an entirely different story. Like, in terms of sound editing, I mean. Have remembered that I should try to take a more relaxed approach to the commentary, so that's why I'm trying. So from what I understand, the tunnel, this tunnel in Ryde, the floor wasn't raised or lowered, which I find unusual because. Hold on a second, just having a drink of water. Because in about 1967, when the Ryde to Shanklin section was being electrified, the tunnel floor was raised to cope with the flooding issue, and that meant that they could only use the deep level or the ex-London Underground stock. But of course the D78 stock, which is now the class 484, is a subsurface train, and I didn't think that the subsurface trains would be able to fit in that tunnel, but as it turns out, apparently they do fit through the tunnel without any major issues. Incidentally, I don't really know how to feel about. Well, sorry, sort of getting the words mixed up again. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure why the 483s were replaced by more ex-London Underground stock, but no, the main thing is that in some ways I suppose they're continuing the tradition of replacing trains on the Isle of Wight with former London Underground stock. It's pulling into Ryde St John's Road, and yeah, there's a unit in that ugly fictional livery. And yeah, I don't know about you, but to me, this livery just looks all sorts of wrong. Although saying that, I've probably got this shade of like bluish grey or whatever it's meant to be on my reskin wrong. I dare say some people would point it out in the comments, but yeah, well, it may not. This main dark blue may not be entirely accurate, but I'm still happy with how it turned out. Indeed, I think it was pretty hard to get the base livery right. And although saying that, I think the hardest part to make this livery for me was this little logo, this little part of the Island Line logo. And that's the other thing, is that from what I understand, whilst Rivet couldn't get the license to do the proper SWR livery, they could still legally use the Island Line branding. But despite the presence of this horrible default livery, I think it's the first thing I've seen here at Ryde St John's Road depot is that it was a welcome improvement over the original Isle of Wight route, which for some reason did not have static trains just sitting in the depot, and I didn't like that because it just made the routes look very unrealistically quiet. Why these trains have now got a horn, I have absolutely no idea. But I dare say it's because... Well, actually no, I can't really work out why the 484s have now got horns, especially when they've retained the whistle, like this old air whistle. Considering that historically these tube trains have always just had air whistles. Although that's another point, is that I've never understood why the London Underground trains have always had air whistles rather than horns. Well, in saying that, I'd imagine it'd be kind of funny to suddenly you're like Baker Street on the Bakerloo line or Jubilee, whatever your preference is, and then this train comes into the station, and then all of a sudden you hear this massive, this insanely loud, like Nathan K5LA, or any Americans watching will probably know what a K5LA is. It's certainly very loud, dare I say, booming horn. And the other thing about the horns, or the horn on this 484, is that I'm a bit surprised that it's only one tone. So if you're any bit familiar with British trains, then you'll probably know that they generally have two-tone horns. And they certainly don't have whistles, that's for sure. Next station is Smallbrook Junction. Yeah, I deliberately picked a service that would be stopping at Smallbrook Junction, because not all of them do. And indeed, I believe in real life, trains will only stop at Smallbrook Junction when the Isle of Wight steam railway is running, because that's the sole reason why the station was built, to serve as an interchange between the two lines. Because this is one of the few stations in the UK that has no road access at all, and consequently can only be reached by train. Let's get out and have a look, because I saw either in an advert or a preview stream that wrong button again, that Rivet altered the station so that you can actually go in the ticket office on the steam side. Okay, what's going on here? Why are these two phasing through the platform surface? I think that's something that needs to be fixed. You'd think that they would have been noticed before the route was released. And here's the ticket office. There's not really a lot I can say, but I think this is quite a cool little addition, because on the previous version of the Isle of Wight route you couldn't go in here. But yeah, I suppose it makes sense for there to be a little ticket office here, since I'd imagine most people coming in to Smallbrook wanting to go on the steam railway would run, or wouldn't have a ticket otherwise. What's this? It's the usual thing you get at railway stations. It's a shame that the actual steam railway isn't included on this route, because that would have been pretty fun to nip off the 484 here at Smallbrook and then go take over control of a class, well, not a class, but like the LSWR Adams 02 or the IVIT 2MT number 41298. Those terriers that railway has. Anyway. That's the point. I haven't actually shown you the interior of this thing, and I do apologise. If I remember to do so, I'll show you the interior when we get to grading. One thing I've noticed about this unit is that it seems to be an awful lot more power or throttle notches than I initially thought. As you can see, there's just about to see on the HUD there that there's a maximum of 7 notches. So another thing I've noticed about the 484s, at least based on footage I've seen from real life, is that they always seem to take a very long time to get moving. It's either that or the drivers are just driving, well, starting off very slowly just to ensure a smooth ride for the passengers. But I thought that, I mean, that would make sense, because you wouldn't want the passengers to have a bumpy ride, or to have whatever the opposite of a smooth ride, a rough ride, I suppose. And I thought that it was just to do with the severe speed restrictions at most of the stations. Like, as you would have seen back at the Pier Head, and indeed the Esplanade, the speed limit along there is only, at the pier, it's only 15 miles an hour. Well, at the Pier Head it's only 15 miles an hour. But then along the pier itself, it's 20. But on this, of course, as you can see on this section that we're on now, it's 45 miles an hour, which is the maximum permitted speed over the whole line. And I can't imagine they would ever be able to get these trains up to 60 miles an hour. Although I can see on the speedometer there that it actually goes up to 75. I dread to think what would happen if we tried getting one of these things up to 75 miles an hour. And indeed, I don't think they would have gone that fast on the original district line. But now that we've got the 484 in the game, and thus one of the variants of the rebuilt D78 stock, I reckon it would be pretty, dare I say, cool, I don't actually like saying that word, to see the the Class 230. Preferably the Transport for Wales version with like a Bidston to Wrexham Central route. That would be interesting. Either that or like the Marston Vale line with the London North Western Railway version of the 230. I wonder what the realistic practice for like horn and whistle usage is on these trains. Because how I would do it would be that I would use the horn normally, but the only time I'd use the whistle would be when you're shunting in and out of the depot. That's the other thing I've just realised and noticed. The other thing I've just noticed is that historically there was like a 20 mile an hour speed limit, like around this curve into Brading, but I can see now that it's down to 15, and that's new. There's a signal with the I don't know what you call those white dots that go pointing left or right, but I do know that means, or that will tell you which track you're taking at the next junction. And that was something that wasn't on the original IOW, because silly game. Although for a second there I thought that it had actually crashed. That'd be the last thing I need. But yeah, as I was saying, the original version of this route that Rivet Games made set, I think, in like 2020, back when there was just a single track from Smallbrook Junction all the way to Sandown, and that created a bit of a bottleneck and kind of messed up the scheduling for this line, because the crossing loops were only at Ryde because the only places where the trains could pass each other were either at Ryde St John's Road or Sandown, which means that whilst they could run 2 trains an hour over this line, they had to run at like at 20 and 40 minute intervals rather than even half-hourly service. But yeah, but during that modernisation, they reinstated the loop here at Brading to allow for a half-hourly service, which was handy. That's right, I was going to show you the interior of this train. So I think it is. I don't know what. I'm not familiar enough with the original D78 stock, but from what I can tell, this new interior doesn't look too different from the original. But the other thing is that unlike there's some luggage storage and an interesting way to get the doors in the middle open. You can't just press the silly thing. Yeah, you have to press that button to unlock the door. You can't just turn the handle like you used to. But one thing I was going to say about these 484s is that, as you can see, they don't have toilets, unlike the 230s. Now, this makes perfect sense for these trains to not have toilets when the journeys on this line are so short that they don't need to have toilets on the train. Indeed, I think the maximum the maximum amount of time that you can be spending on one of these trains is possibly only about like 30 minutes, if that. Because yeah, this line is very short, at only 8.5 miles. What's that blue marker? What's that blue badge say? I didn't notice that on the original version of this route. Working departure screens. I like that. Now I did say that this line is now, or can now run a half-hourly service, but I'm pretty sure that I later found out that I think that's only for like morning and evening peak periods. And I think at the time of the day that we're running this service, it's only meant to be hourly. Okay, so on this side of the station, I think about here, but they can't really see any evidence of it anymore, is what's left of the... not what's left, is where the platform for the Bembridge branch used to be. But brought you over here mainly so that we can have a look at the signal box. And this is something I was quite excited for, as silly as that may sound. Now this is impressive. And it's not often I say that and genuinely mean it. So you've got all the proper levers modelled, and I don't know I still don't really know how a signal box works, aside from moving the big levers, but that doesn't mean I'm not, that doesn't mean it's boring, but actually that's the point. What is the... oh yeah, this is interesting. It's this board here shows you the track layout and how it was when the line to Bembridge was still open. That line, of course, closed in 1953. Right, might as well get back to our train, seeing as we're 10 minutes late. But as I recall saying near the start of the video, I have wanted to take a more relaxed approach to this journey so that we could see, so that we could take a look at some of the details. Next station is Sandown. I'm surprised that even like off-peak weekday service on this line is now hourly, because I would have thought that they'd try to keep a half-hourly service going, or like twice an hour going all throughout the day. But obviously I don't know everything about this line. Indeed, I don't really know what the passenger numbers are like. But they're obviously sufficient enough to have warranted the complete overhaul and modernisation of this route. So there's a lot more track noise, or just noise in general, that I'm hearing. Although, yeah, the doors are still... well, there's no wind. You can't open that window on the cab doors, because I would have thought that would let more of the exterior noise in. Seems like there's a lot more shrubs and bushes and things by the line side than I remember. Although in saying that, I of course have never actually been to... I still haven't been to the Isle of Wight in real life. And even though the 483s are gone, well, let's say gone, but gone from the main line, and even though it's been extensively modernised, it is still, I still think it's quite a unique line. Obviously with the station out at sea at Ryde Pier Head, and the fact that it still uses ex-London Underground stock. And it begs the question as to, like, in 30 odd years, when the 484s are due for replacement, I wonder if they'll be replaced with even more ex-London Underground stock. Like, for all we know, they could end up somehow using the 2009 stock from the Victoria line and bugging that on this route instead. But that wouldn't, I can't imagine that would work, because the 2009 stock uses automatic operation, whereas of course trains on this line are always driven manually. Say that this cab interior is in some ways surreal, because even though this is in reality something like a 42-year-old train, the rebuilding that Viva Rail did is so extensive that it doesn't look like, on the inside at least, it doesn't really feel like a 42-year-old train. Like, they've basically taken the old body shell, the D78 stock, and basically converted it then rebuilt it so extensively that it's basically an entirely new train. indeed they've certainly got some really modern features like these LED lights. And to an extent, I suppose these units are kind of tailor-made for this line. Not like the 483s, which, if memory serves, were nowhere near as extensively modernised. So I think the interiors on those older trains were largely the same as they would have been back in their days on the Underground. But speaking of the 483s, I'm pretty sure that one of them is preserved at the Isle of Wight Steam Railway, and that's Unit 483007. But I think there's at least one other unit that's preserved elsewhere on the Isle of Wight, but don't quote me on that. Yeah, I don't get why those dinosaur toys are here. They do look a little childish. Yeah, this is, as you can see here at Sandown, this is another one of those stations that's been modified where they've just tacked this addition onto the platform surface to make sure there's level boarding. I'm trying to think if there's anything else to have a look at or to see. Oh, hello, there's these really weird plant pots that vaguely resemble the actual trains, but yeah, can't get past that, or can't get over to see them properly because of the invisible wall. This would be nice to just have, or to have your house backing onto the railway station. Dare say the kids would enjoy it if they were messing around on that trampoline and suddenly one of the 484s comes along. Indeed, I think to some extent I've always wanted to live right next to the railway, but I suppose I just have to make do with at least living within walking distance of a railway. I always end up missing that 10 mile an hour speed limit. So I remember when I was driving the old Isle of Wight Route and Train Simulator, I would always end up just ever so slightly breaking that 10 mile an hour speed limit as you leave Sandown. See, I see old habits die hard, I suppose. Next station is Lake. Does sound a little bit like, or does sound relatively close to the original D78 style sound, or at least that original motor noise that you hear on the Underground. Well, on a lot of those, not just the Underground trains, but a lot of those older electric units. But indeed, I think Viva Rail obviously did fairly heavily modernise a lot of aspects of these trains, but I don't know them well enough to know how many of like the original, or how much of the original D78 stock was actually being retained for these units, or these rebuilt units, I should say. Notice that the acceleration and braking on these things is better than I was expecting. One thing I haven't mentioned yet is that there are only 5 of these 484s in existence, and I think the idea is that that they can have, that they can have at least a maximum of 4 of them in service. So that would be each service would be run by 2 units coupled together to make a 4-car consist, and then leaving the 5th unit in the depot as a spare. I think that's how they do it. Obviously, don't quote me on that. Because indeed, you can see as we go along these stop markers for like 2 and 4-car formations, Which is curious because I think historically the original D78 stock were actually 6-car units. So it really is quite a massive downgrade in terms of the length of the train. But then again, it's like you wouldn't realistically ever expect to see 6-car trains on the Isle of Wight. And I just realised I missed a couple of collectibles there. Yes, I'm aware of how stupid it is to do this, but I'm sorry, I am a collectible hunter, at least in this game. What's that? Dinosaur and one of those dorky captain's hats again. Silly chair height. Didn't realise you could alter the height of the... Didn't realise you could do that. Doesn't really seem to make much of a difference though. In case you don't know too much about for those who don't know too much about the history of the Isle of Wight's railways, Shanklin, which is now the end of the line, wasn't always the terminus, because prior to 1967. This line down from Ryde Pier Head actually continued a further, I think it was like 4 miles down to Ventnor, but of course that section was closed, and I think has now been replaced by a bus service. You know, imagine there's now a lot of sort of almost like local inter-town, inter-city bus services in the Isle of Wight. Yeah, it's certainly the current network is certainly a far cry from what it used to be. Like Newport was which I think is one of the largest towns on the island. That used to be the centre of the Isle of Wight's rail network, because it was almost like when it got to its full extent, it was almost like a hub and spoke arrangement. And yeah, Newport was basically at the centre of it all. So you had lines radiating off towards Cowes, up to the north, south to Ventnor West via Erstone, and then across to Yarmouth and Freshwater, then section up towards Ryde, and then of course the main line from, or what I think was the main line from Ryde Pier Head to Ventnor. And indeed what you see at the Pier Head now is a far cry from what the station used to be. Because from what I gather, it actually had 4 tracks. It used to have 4 tracks and platforms, which I find incredibly hard to believe, considering, again, a station at a pier about half a mile out to sea. It's just the way things go, I suppose. Now, as we arrive into Shanklin here, I've noticed that this looks like it's a case where the track itself has been lowered rather than the platform being raised. Now this sign, this black and white sign that you're just seeing right in front of you, is something that was not present on the default, or on the original Isle of Wight. Let's get the doors open. So it's, in some ways, it's a good thing to see this detail finally added, because I seem to recall that this is there in real life, but why it wasn't on that original Isle of Wight route, I have no idea. I'm making a lot of comparisons to that original route, aren't I? I suppose it's hard. What's this? What am I saying? Of course it's a tree, or a tree branch rather. Just getting a few more screenshots as and when I think they're necessary. So have a quick look around the station while we're at it. There's a similar plaque to what we saw at Braiding. What am I saying? Similar? That looks identical. Yeah, you can certainly here. You can really tell where indeed there's still a little bit of the other platform here, so you can certainly tell that Shanklin wasn't always a terminus station. Though I think the embankment past this brick wall and across that road. I think that there was an embankment there, but that's now been completely removed, and I think it's now like a roundabout in through there. Obviously can't get to it, but dare say there'd be people out there that would know more about that sort of thing than me. Doors shut. So yeah, that's just been my first look at the Island Line 2022 add-on, and now that we're at the end of the run, oh, that took much longer than I thought it would. But despite how long that took, I do hope that you've enjoyed this run, and that you've enjoyed seeing the Class 484. And if you want to get this livery, it is on the TSW2 Creators Club, along with quite a few other people who have done their own take on the real livery. But for now, I suppose I might as well say thank you all for watching, and stay tuned for at least one more video I'm going to make on this add-on. Right, see you soon.